get started with this story about Donald Trump. Now, Fox News interviewed Donald Trump one-on-one recently for a pretty in-depth discussion. I have 2 clips that I want to show you and get into. And then we're also going to talk a little bit about polls that I think you should see. A new poll came out today in reference to Donald Trump versus Joe Biden. I think you'll find that pretty interesting. And then we're going to get into this breaking news story that Trump actually announced himself as well. So let's get into this video here, this clip from the interview. Trump says this is the most dangerous time in the history of our country. Let's get started.
Communist China wants to become the #1 superpower, overtaking the United States. We know this. What can be done about it? Give us your sense of the policy and the response that should be happening toward Communist China.
So I know President Xi better than I know you, which is pretty good.
Really?
Okay, yeah, I really think so. So I know him very well. I've dealt with him many times. He came to Mar-a-Lago, as you know. He stayed.
Well, he's not a friend of the United States, I don't think.
No, he doesn't hate the United States, but he loves China. He wants to take everything away from the United States. He wants to not destroy the United States. He just wants everything. You got to understand, this is a man who's at the top of his game.
Pause for just a second. Did you notice how he said he doesn't hate the United States? I'm surprised they even let him say that on mainstream media, that he doesn't hate the United States. He said he's close to Xi. She seems to be surprised by that. He said that he wants the best for China. And is that any different from any other president that we've had during our lifetime that said they want the best for the United States? You see, the problem is we can't have 2 countries or multiple countries saying they want the best for their country. We can't have that because of the Wolfowitz Doctrine, which says that the United States will be the #1, the only global power, and no other country should have that right. So this is really important for people to hear, because that's no different than what we've heard our president say about the United States.
He's dealing with an incompetent person in Joe Biden. He's never seen anything like it. And I was very tough on China. I tariffed them to a level 25 and 50% everything. We took in hundreds of billions of dollars. By the way, the happiest person in the world was President Xi. And I got along with him great, but he is all for China. He doesn't care anything about our country. And I'll tell you this.
Again, doesn't that sound familiar? He's right about the tariffs too. At least he didn't lie. He didn't lie. He definitely did, implement a lot of tariffs on China when he was president.
He doesn't believe when he meets with Joe Biden. He thinks it's a joke. He can't believe. He sees this guy. If you would see President Xi, you can't duplicate him in Hollywood. There's nobody in Hollywood could play the role. These people, these leaders, are at the top of their game. These are smart people, including Macron of France. I could go through the whole list of people, including Putin. Now, Putin's been wounded, probably. Let's see how it all turns out. It's not over. I mean, one way or the other. But these people are sharp, tough, and generally vicious. They're vicious, and they're at the top of their game. We have a man that has no clue what's happening. It's the most dangerous time in the history of our country.
So what should be the response?
Ukraine would have never happened if I was president. None of this stuff would have happened. You wouldn't have inflation, for one thing. But going back to that, Ukraine would have never happened. Taiwan, which will at some point happen under the...
You hear this? So this is the same thing when Norm Finkelstein was here. This was something that we agreed on, is that we really do think that if Trump were still president, this conflict with Russia and Ukraine probably would not have happened. I think Trump's probably telling the truth about that. Now, does that mean that Trump is anti-war? No. Just because someone is against this war doesn't mean they're anti-war. They can be against this war and still approve of all the other ones. Let's just be clear.
This group would never have happened. You never heard these things being talked about. I knew about them because I'd be with President Xi. I'd talk, and he likes Taiwan a lot, and Putin liked Ukraine a lot. It was the apple of his eye. But he never made a move with me because he knew he couldn't do it. Remember this also with Putin. You know, they like to say, oh, Trump was soft. I was tougher on Russia than anybody in history with the sanctions and everything else.
You said you could end the war in Ukraine in 24 hours.
Yes, I could.
How would you do that?
I know Zelensky very well. I felt he was very honorable because when they asked him about the perfect phone call that I made, he said it was indeed he said it was, he didn't even know what they were talking about. He could have grandstanded, oh, I felt threatened.
Well, that's not going to be enough for Putin to stop bombing
No,
Ukraine.
I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is that I know Zelensky very well and I know Putin very well, even better. And I had a good relationship, very good with both of them. I would tell Zelensky, no more, you got to make a deal. I would tell Putin, if you don't make a deal, we're going to give them a lot. We're going to give them more than they ever got if we have to. I will have the deal done in one day. One day.
Now,
so the message that he would send to Vladimir Putin is, look, you got to reach this deal. If you don't, then we will continue to give Ukraine weapons. That's what he means when he says we're going to give them more. We're going to help them more. And the message that he would give to Zelensky is, yeah, you got to reach some kind of agreement here. And so here's the thing. The Biden administration isn't trying to do any type of negotiation. They're just saying, okay, we got to just continue to help Ukraine. They want this to continue to escalate because their goal, again, as I've said before, is to remove Vladimir Putin from leadership in Russia. They want to implement some type of regime change. That is the ultimate goal. If that wasn't the goal, why wouldn't they try to call for some type of negotiation? Like, this is serious. Like, do you really want to be at war with Russia when Russia is close friends with China and China can jump in if they need be to help assist in this as well? No, we could not. I want to be very clear. No matter how many troops Joe Biden sends over to Europe, the United States government, we could not beat Russia and China. You're insane if you think that we could. And that's why a lot of us are calling for the de-escalation. Because of that, we don't want it to get to that level. We don't want to have a nuclear war. But the Biden administration doesn't care. They don't care. Again, their goal is regime change, not so much to help the people, because if you're trying to help the people, you wouldn't send cluster ammunition, which is, again, not a direct target. It is actually, it spreads out. It's going to hurt more people, more innocent people. So if you really cared about the women and the children, you wouldn't send those type of ammunition over there.
China apparently is setting up this spy center in Cuba,
it's
100 miles away from
believable.
Florida. No. So what is the answer? What should the response be to communist China?
They will be closed down within, I don't want to say 24 hours, but very quickly. They will.
You mean the spy center in Cuba?
They can't have. Look, spy center is really bad. That's just the beginning. They're going to end up building military islands. You know, in opposite Japan, they said, yes, we're building a residential housing development. It turned out to be one of the world's largest military bases. Japan should have watched that. And I predicted, I said, there's no way. You know why?
So it's not okay for China to have military bases around the world, but it's okay for the U.S. to have military bases around the world. And see, this is where I start to push back on people when they tell me, oh, no, Trump's anti-war. You know, they're all anti-war. Yeah, just switch Ukraine with China, and then you'll see how people really feel. In reference to the base on Cuba, I thought that was debunked already. Notice how the interviewer here continues to say communist China instead of just China. That's on purpose. That's to make the American people afraid. Do you need to be afraid of China? And if you feel you need to be afraid of them, what is that fear really about? I would say it's more an economic fear, because they do have the power to be great economically. They are improving economically when you look at other countries in the world. They are a competitor to the United States. But let's be real, we had a hand in that. We had a hand in that when we decided to send jobs to China. So let's think about this for a second. Let's really sit back and start thinking.
Looked at a 15,000-foot runway they were building. A Gulfstream doesn't need a 15,000-foot runway, okay? I looked at this plan. I said, look at the runway. That's for military fighter jets. That's for military planes. That has nothing to do with private. They said they were building a residential development on this island. Turns out to be a military base. That's what they do. You know, one of the things in Afghanistan that's so sad, we should have never left Bagram. We should have kept it because Bagram is one of the largest military bases in the world. Cost us billions of dollars to build many years ago. And forget about Afghanistan. You don't want it for that. You want it because it's 1 hour away from where China is building their nuclear weapons, Bagram. And they left at the dark of night.
Well, China has been much more aggressive in these last 2 years. We know that. Surveillance balloons, a spy balloon that traveled across the country.
I thought it was a weather balloon. You see how they can continue to have these talking points? Wasn't it confirmed that this was a weather balloon?
Aggressive with me.
Police stations. That's what I want to ask you. Were you aware of this kind of surveillance program underway of America from China in your administration? Were you aware?
They would have never.
Was there a surveillance balloon flying?
No, there wasn't.
Never?
Never. They would have.
If it was, do you think he would tell her? He's running for president. Do you think that he would admit, oh, yeah, when I was president, they had one of those too? No.
Never done it to me.
Well, this administration, the Biden administration said, oh, this started under
They
Trump.
did, and then they took it back. They said, they said balloons over Trump. They never did. These balloons are pretty big. You see those balloons. It was amazing that they sent this large balloon right over the middle of our country, by the way, over nuclear areas and other areas. And that you shoot that, if that happens, it would have never happened with me. It would have never happened with me. You should go back to another subject that you mentioned. Cuba. They're building military installations in Cuba, and the fake news media doesn't even talk about it. This is one of the most dangerous things, and nobody's even talking about it. China has to leave immediately, and they will. If I'm president, they will leave.
Let me get back to Taiwan, because we haven't touched on this. Should the U.S. help defend Taiwan if it means going to war with China?
Well, I don't want to say it because if I'm in the position of president, I don't want to say what I'm thinking. If I answer that question, it'll put me in a very bad negotiating position. With that being said, Taiwan did take all of our chip business. We used to make our own chips. Now they're made in Taiwan. 90% of the chips
advanced
are made in
semiconductor
Taiwan.
chips, 90% are made in Taiwan. If China goes in there, they'll be able to turn the world on and off. Isn't that right?
Did Taiwan take our chips, or did we again send those jobs over to Taiwan? You see, this is the problem. I want people to understand. I think we need to be careful with the vocabulary that's being used here. I don't remember anyone coming over here and taking things from the United States or taking jobs from the United States. I do remember the United States shipping jobs overseas because it was more profitable for the CEOs, because it was cheaper for those companies so they could lay off people and just keep a handful of employees, make more profit for the CEO. I do remember that happening. I do remember NAFTA. So you see how they just frame things, and there's no pushback from her. No pushback.
China takes Taiwan, they will turn the world off, potentially. Potentially. But remember this. Taiwan took, smart, brilliant. They took our business away. We should have stopped them. We should have taxed them. We should have tariffed them.
I want to ask you about these legal issues.
She doesn't say anything about that. Follow-up question should be, what businesses did they take away? What do you mean they took them? They didn't take anything. We gave it away. We gave it away to be cheap, in order to be cheap. But she doesn't even ask. She goes right into the next question. So she's get into the indictments.
You mentioned the indictment. Your team is asking for a postponement of a trial. Yeah. When do you want this postponed until?
Well, look, this is all election interference. There's no case here. It comes under the Presidential Records Act. I'm allowed to do this. I'm allowed to have all the records I want. In fact, the New York Times, believe it or not, did an article. Please, 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 Mr. President, may we have the documents? It only applies to me. It doesn't apply to a vice president. It doesn't apply to anybody else. The Presidential Records Act, 1977-78. They did this for and these people, Jack Smith, whatever his name is, whatever his real name is, but Jack Smith is a thug. He's been overturned in the Supreme Court of the United States for horrible things that he did, horrible, horrible things. And I have to ask this also. Biden has probably 30 or 40 times the number of documents and boxes that I had. You don't even hear anything about it. He doesn't want to give them. He has boxes in Chinatown, and he's getting a lot of money at Chinatown. He's getting a lot of money from China. He's got boxes in Chinatown. Why are they in Chinatown? He's got.
So this situation here, I will agree with. In reference to mainstream media, at least liberal media, the issue with Joe Biden and the classified documents, I believe they mentioned this like one time. And then there was a press conference that Joe Biden had, and a reporter from the press conference actually asked Joe Biden about the classified documents. And he said, yeah, he did have them. But there is a double standard. And again, it depends on which party is in power at the White House at that point in time. Right now, the party in power in the White House is the Democratic Party. If the roles were reversed, then Trump would be given more leeway, just like Joe Biden's given more leeway. So this is the problem with the political parties, because everybody seems to have all these rules and standards, except when it applies to their party. When it applies to their party, all of a sudden the rules and the standards are excused, or they're not talked about. It just goes right out the window.
Boxes in his garage under his Corvette, all over the floor of a garage, with a garage door that you can cut open with a paper scissor. I have Mar-a-Lago, I have Secret Service protection, everything else. But even regardless of that, this is the Presidential Records Act. I'm allowed to do this. What they're doing is election interference. They want to try and damage my name so that I can't win the election. But so far, the people of our country see it. And my numbers have gone up as opposed to down, because the people see it. It's a terrible thing. They've weaponized the Department of Justice. Do you know that they've
Do you have any indication?
Okay, we're going to stop here, and then we're going to go to the next clip. The people do see it. We're going to talk about his numbers here in just a second, which I think may be surprising to you guys. But we'll get into that in just a second. But we want to get into this conversation here, this part of the interview, where he talks about the FBI. So, of course, you know, one of the hot topics right now is, should the FBI either be dismantled or reformed? So I want you to hear what he has to say in reference to that, because I thought this was really interesting.
Possible. Now, the FBI has tremendous problems of credibility. The DOJ is weaponized like I've never seen before. I mean, they come after me on boxes and they can't find drugs. You know how many cameras they have opposite the front door of the Situation Room, where these drugs were the cocaine. Now I understand they have many other forms of drugs. They know who this was. They know the person. It's impossible. How can they not know the person?
The Secret Service said that they are ending the investigation of the cocaine found at the White House, and they didn't have any fingerprints, and they said that they cannot identify whose cocaine it was.
But again, the Secret Service works for the President of the United States. And the President of the United States right now is a Democrat. It is Joe Biden. So again, they're going to try to protect the President of the United States in as many ways as possible, not just physical protection, but also damaging in credibility in reference to the president as well. So you're right. He's right about this, how they just swept that under the rug. Like, okay, no big deal. There's cameras everywhere. Like, you can't tell me, oh God, we couldn't figure out who this belonged to. You didn't look at any of those tapes. None of the cameras caught that. I'm pretty sure they probably did. But they're not going to look into that again, because that would be damaging towards the President of the United States. And that's why you're not going to hear any more about it for the most part. In reference to the FBI, and he's talking about how they're all over the place. They apparently can't be trusted. We saw this through the Twitter files release from Matt Taibbi. And we've seen this in other situations, such as the testimony from the FBI director recently as well. So yeah, they're not to be trusted. I think a lot of us didn't trust the FBI to begin with anyway, but now it's more apparent. Now people are starting to see it. You know, it's not just behind closed doors anymore. It's right out there in the open. What would he do differently in reference to the situation?
You know, I've gotten to know the Secret Service really well. Okay. And I can't speak more highly of people. These are incredible people. And I believe that they know everything. They're really smart and really good at what they do. And I don't think it's possible for bags of cocaine to be left in a certain area by the Situation Room. I'm not talking about, 5 blocks away. The Situation Room, where you decide on war, where you decide on nuclear,
So
And they
are
have bags
tourists allowed in that area where the cocaine was
I
found?
don't think so. I don't think so. I think only people that have strong passes or family members are able to go through those doors. It's very
See, that was different. Isn't that different from what the press secretary said? But again, remember, her job is also to protect the president.
interesting. I was much nicer to Biden in speeches and all. I actually was criticized by some people. I respect the office of the presidency, and not that I was perfect with him, but I could have been much tougher. The last few weeks, I've been very nasty and very tough and very truthful. He's a corrupt man. He's a corrupt president. He's grossly incompetent. And the reason I ask, because they actually indicted an opponent who was the president of the United States. I got indicted. I said, I can't believe it. I got indicted. I could tell you stories of what happened when I went down to New York and when I went down with policemen looking at me and crying. Ted Kennedy told me he was a friend of mine, believe it or not, different sides of the aisle, but he was a friend of mine. He liked me, I liked him. I did him a big favor one time that helped him a lot on something, and he always liked me. And he said to me a long time ago, I was saying, who's the smartest senator? And I won't tell you the answer because I don't particularly like the guy. I said, who's the dumbest? He said, probably Joe. This is Ted Kennedy. He knew them all. I said,
that actually does sound like something Ted Kennedy would say. I'm sorry. Ted Kennedy passed away, but that sounds like something Ted Kennedy would have said.
what do you mean, Joe? Who's Joe? Joe Biden. He's the dumbest. And so
Ted Kennedy said Joe Biden was the dumbest senator.
Years ago, that's right. He said he was the dumbest. I said, who's the dumbest? He said, probably Joe. He said he's hale and hearty and well-met personality. But you go to policy or you go to taxes or anything that's complicated, he doesn't have a clue. This is stuff that he told me years ago. Who would have thought this guy was going to become president? But in prime...
People would say the same thing about Trump. That's the funny part. People would say the same thing about Trump. Who would have thought this guy would become president?
Time, he wasn't very good.
Was it a mistake to put Christopher Wray there? I mean, obviously the FBI is not following any of the things that you're talking about.
Sadly, it probably was. He was recommended very strongly by Chris Christie, who's, a sad case. I mean, I watch him. He's a sad case.
Well, he's in this race, he said, just to take you down.
Well, I know. And you know how he's doing? He's at 1%. And he probably won't even make the debate stage. No, Chris he's sad. I mean, I watched him the other day. He said, I built 47 miles of wall. I built over 500 miles of wall. And that's Homeland Security statements. I had the safest border in the history of our country. I built massive miles of wall and was going to put up another 200 miles. Everything was built. They just had to erect it. Would have taken 3 weeks, far beyond my statement about building a wall. I was way over. I mean, what we did was incredible. But between the wall and Mexico, when you say Mexico, I got Mexico. You know what? I got them to pay for 28,000 soldiers on our border. People said, well, Mexico. Well, Mexico did pay. They gave me free of charge 28,000 soldiers.
In a second term, will you shut down the border?
Yeah, I will close up the border except that people come in legally, because we need people to come in. We want people to come in, but we don't want people coming in from mental institutions and from jails.
Let's pause here for just a second, because there's something I want to mention about this, and then we're going to move on to the FBI part. I will continue to say this until I am blue in the face. Most people come here illegally via plane, not across the border on the ground. You know how they do that? It's called overstayed visas. That's how most people, and this is the thing, like Fox News needs to get this right, but I think CNN and them, they all need to get this right. This has been discussed multiple times. People have proven this, that most people are here illegally because of overstayed visas. Just got to put that out there. Now we're going to move to the FBI part, because I want you to hear about the FBI reform. Here we go.
Because of all of these reasons that you mentioned, take a step back. How should the FBI be reformed? For example, the Republicans say, take the headquarters out of Washington, make the headquarters in Alabama. Good idea. And what else do you want to see in terms of a reform of these agencies?
So I had a plan to take down the FBI building and build a brand new building in Washington, because I think that the FBI should be somewhat close to DOJ if they're all honest people. You know, I mean, they want to move it to a different state. They were going to move it to Virginia, build this, thing. It was going to cost, I mean, if you talk about environmentalists, the traffic was massive, et cetera, et cetera. It's already massive.
Well, they want $3.5 billion. They want it to be bigger than the Pentagon.
They want it to be this monster building very far away. I like the idea of it being close to the Justice Department because they work together to me. And they had the land, they had everything. You could renovate the building or build a new building in that location. There'd be a little bit of turmoil during construction, but not a lot. And that was what I preferred. That's what I was going to do. And it would have cost a lot less money. But I liked the FBI being somewhat close to the Department of Justice. I think it was, and I will tell you, the FBI people felt that was good also.
So you don't agree?
So he's okay with reforming. I just want to be very clear here because I want people to really understand this, because I've heard people make this statement. Well, he wants to abolish the FBI. No, that is not what he's saying. He's okay with some type of reform in reference to the FBI, but he's not going the direction of like Marjorie Taylor Greene, who's saying abolish the FBI. So just everyone write that down.
Move it to Alabama with what the Republicans are
I'll
saying.
move anything to Alabama because I love Alabama. If Alabama wants it, I'm all for it. No, I love Alabama.
Yeah.
But I think there's something to be said about the FBI and the Department of Justice or Injustice. Right now, it's not the Department, it's the Department of Injustice. I think they have to be, they work together. They could walk across the street. So every time you need somebody in court or whatever you're doing, they have to ride an hour and a half or 2 hours in traffic from a place in Virginia that's very far away.
Should FISA be reviewed?
And we're going to pause there. Now, I'm sorry, but he loves Alabama. Come on now. Come on. I've never heard anyone say that. Now, there's one more clip I want to show you. This is in reference to whether or not Joe Biden will be the nominee. So I want to give a shout out here to Case Study QB. This is the clip that made some people scratch their head. His response in reference to this question, whether or not Joe Biden would be the nominee. And they also bring up the fact that the Democratic Party does not want to have debates. Listen to this.
Do you believe Joe Biden will be the Democrat candidate in 2024?
I guess so. I mean, look, I watch him and I listen to him, and you sort of hold your breath and you say, is he going to finish the sentence? I don't know. I guess he is. Look, they have a Democrat machine. They have a lot of votes that are automatic to a Democrat, even though they shouldn't be. Normally you'd say they have the union votes, but I think I have a lot of union votes too. I get tremendous in the car industry. I'm far better than the Democrats. So I said to everybody, you're losing your industry. It's all moving to Mexico and to China.
Let me pause here for a second. That's actually true. A lot of people are saying, Joe Biden's the union president. We'd argue about that. But when Trump is telling you that he also has a lot of union votes, that's actually true. Even here in Massachusetts, Massachusetts is a blue state. But if you talk to some of the guys that work in like the shops at some of these engineering companies, some of the guys that are, basically doing the third shift hours and all that kind of stuff, a lot of times the guys on the shop floor, they belong to a union. Talk to some of those guys, go to some of those facilities. You'll see Trump stickers. You'll hear that a lot of them did support Donald Trump. So he's actually telling the truth about that when he says he does also have a lot of union support. That is actually true.
And I think the workers vote for me. I think they'll vote for me much more than the union leaders who are indoctrinated into the Democrat Party. But no, I think that Biden will probably be the candidate if he can make it.
Well, the Democrats don't want to do debates. I know Marianne Williamson and RFK Jr. want to debate. What do you think about that?
Well, I understand why he doesn't want to do it. I mean, I truly understand why he doesn't want to do it. But they are, there's a big difference. Although in the case of RFK, I've seen polls where he's at 20%. That's not bad. But I understand why he doesn't want to do that. Look, when you're running for office and you have, in his case, let's say he has a 30 or 40 point lead, why would he do it? Now,
let's pause here for just a second. That's the part where some people were like, what did he just say? But you have to remember, so he's basically telling you here that he understands why Joe Biden doesn't want to do a debate. He's not disagreeing with that. And I think some people were shocked that he didn't disagree with that. But then you have to remember, Donald Trump didn't want to do debates either. When Donald Trump was running for re-election, he didn't want to do debates either. Yes, he did have primary challengers. So, I mean, what is he really going to say if you think about it?
People are going to say, well, he can't do it. I actually think he can't do it, if you want to know the truth. I don't think he's capable of doing it. But why would he do it? Especially because of that. Why would he do it? If he's got a 30 or 40 point lead, which is what he's got, I mean, I don't think RFK expects that he's going to be debating. He's a very smart guy, by the way. I don't think he expects to be debating Biden.
You've spent time with him, RFK. Tell me about him. Is he a formidable competitor?
He's a very smart person, yeah. I know a lot of the members of that family, and, you know, he's a very smart guy. And he's hit a little bit of a nerve. I think he really has. And a lot of Democrats I know want to vote for him. But again, if he's at 20% and if Biden has a big lead, number one, Biden can't debate him because he's not capable.
So that is the clip where some people were just like, I can't believe he said that and yada, yada. And I was like, so you guys heard that from Donald Trump, that he doesn't, there you go. He actually does not blame Joe Biden for not wanting to debate. I think people were expecting to hear something different. Now, that interview happened, and then more news came out about Donald Trump. Now, I saw this today, this morning. I had only planned to talk about that interview. And then this was released. Can you believe they are trying to indict Donald Trump again? Again. Listen to this. Kid you not. Trump says he's received a target letter from special counsel Jack Smith, and this is January, investigators. Yep. Here we go. This is a new one. Donald Trump said Tuesday he expects to be indicted by special counsel Jack Smith, grand jury. I'm skipping this because you know YouTube, citing a target letter he received from investigators on Sunday. Such a letter almost means an arrest and indictment. Trump, who was already been criminally indicted twice in recent months, wrote on Truth Social. Trump said the letter, which is prosecutor's typical precursor to a charging decision, offered him a chance to speak to the grand jury, which meets at the federal courthouse in Washington, D.C. later this week. Targets of criminal investigations rarely speak to grand juries, and Trump has not exercised that right in the two other criminal cases in which he's been charged. The letter is the clearest sign yet that Smith is close to seeking an indictment for Trump's role in the effort to disrupt the peaceful transfer of power. Let's go on here. While the specific crimes that Trump may be charged with are not clear, Smith's team has been eyeing potential obstruction charges related to Trump's actions in the days leading up to January and on that day itself. Let's go down here. Investigators have also examined Trump's consideration of a plan to seize machines from the states, his campaign of false claims, and you can read this here. I'm not going to read this on YouTube because I know how they are. It is unclear whether other figures associated with Trump's effort are also in Smith's sights. Investigators have interviewed dozens of prominent figures in Trump's orbit, including Pence in recent months. Attorney John Eastman and Jeff Clark, two Trump associates considered key allies in his efforts, had their phones seized last year. Trump revealed the target letter as he prepares to fight on another front to delay a criminal trial, also resulting from charges brought by Smith related to his hoarding of national security secrets at his Mar-a-Lago estate. Trump's attorneys will be in court in Fort Pierce, Florida on Tuesday afternoon, asking for the trial to be postponed until after the 2024 election, a prospect that Smith's team has vehemently opposed. So you heard it here, folks. Yes, they are getting ready to indict him again. So this will be the third indictment. Now, obviously, if Donald Trump was not running for president, would they be going through all this right now? Probably not. And this is why some people are pushing back on it. Not to say that Trump is innocent, but they're pushing back on it because they question the timing of it. And also because they realize that this is politically motivated. And I agree with that. I don't like Donald Trump. I'm not voting for Donald Trump, but I question the timing. I think it is suspect. And I don't think this is actually hurting Donald Trump the way that Democrats thought that it would. And I warned you that if they continue to pursue these allegations against him, that it would actually help him and not hurt him. Don't believe me? Look at the recent poll. Now, this poll was released this morning. 2024 National Republican Primary. Donald Trump, 55%. Ron DeSantis, 20%. Ron DeSantis, 20%. I think he's been hovering around there, actually. But Donald Trump got an increase of 35 points. When Trump told people that he could shoot someone on Fifth Avenue and his people would still love him, he was actually telling the truth. This just makes him look like a martyr because of the timing. And a lot of people see it that way. Whether you like Donald Trump or not, a lot of people see it that way. They're going after him because he's running for president again and they don't want him to win again. So it's politically motivated. And all this is doing is just helping him in the polls. Who else gets plus 35 after they've been indicted twice and they're about to be indicted again? So I hope this is a wake-up call for all the people. I did not intend to spend that much time on that one story. I'm sorry. But I hope this is a wake-up call for all the people, because the more they come after him, the more they target him, the more his percentage grows in the polls. I don't know anyone else who could have done that. Dana says that's exactly what they're trying to do to Trump. Thank you for the correction, Fred. Sorry, Sabby, Trump did not get an increase of 35 points. He leads DeSantis by 35 points. Thank you. Sorry about that. It's been a long day, Fred. All right, let me go to some of the comments. Chicago says, is he allowed to say that Taiwan war is next? I don't know, but he said it. Leroy says, they laying on the heavy propaganda so that the U.S. isn't held responsible for sending jobs overseas. There you go. Thank you for the super chat, Frank Johnson. I was in high school when NAFTA passed. These people would have you believe China came and stole factories in the middle of the night. Mm-hmm. Dr. Nick says, and overstay their student visas. Yep. That is true. That is true, Dr. Nick. And thank you for the super chat, Roger. I bet Obama was smartest one Trump didn't want to say. Probably. Remember, he said he didn't want to name who the smartest one was. Yeah,